As I mentioned at the start of yesterday's show, to say Andrew Cuomo's so-called apology was lacking would be an understatement of epic proportions. Somehow, after being widely criticized for his first defiant and frankly tone-deaf response to the AG's finding that he sexually harassed 11 women and assaulted 2 of them, the soon-to-be ex-governor decided to double down in one of the worst apologies for misbehavior I've ever heard. As he claimed to take responsibility in one breath, he referred to himself as the victim in the next. He reminded us he was a father of daughters and really only apologized for offending women, which are 2 of the worst apology workarounds there are. But most insulting of all, he trotted out his lawyer ahead of him to discredit those who spoke out.
I take full responsibility for my actions. There is a difference between alleged improper conduct and concluding sexual harassment. This is not to say that there are not 11 women who I truly offended. There are. And for that, I deeply, deeply apologize.
I don't mean to take away from how this woman felt, but we do need to think about qualitatively what each of the women are saying and whether these are the types of things that are impeachable offenses. The complainants needed to be scrutinized just as much as the governor and the chamber.
I accept full responsibility. I truly believe it is politically motivated.
So which is it? You take responsibility or it's politically motivated? I'm honestly surprised the term witch hunt didn't come up. But the many ways people manage to mangle apologies has long been a personal obsession of mine. So joining me with their take on Cuomo yesterday, plus a few tips how to genuinely say you're sorry, are Tina Opie. Tina's a visiting scholar at Harvard Business School and founder of Opie Consulting Group. Jen Deaderick is author of She the People, an illustrated history of women's citizenship. It's great to see you both again. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
So, Tina, starting with you, did he get anything right other than the resignation?
I don't think so, Jim. I read through the transcript. I rewatched the video. I was really disappointed in this. In terms of victim blaming, he did that. He talked about how he had crossed the line, but the line had been redrawn. And I'm like, based on what my understandings were of the complaints from the woman, I don't think that was ever appropriate behavior. I get what he means. I'm from the South. I hug people, but there's certain way. I'm not going to rub somebody's arm in a particular way. Period.
Or trace their shirt. Yeah.
Well, it also didn't stop with the arm. And by the way, speaking of the sort of the rules changing, he signed the rule changing into law. Here's a little bit of what he said on that very subject.
In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone. But I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn. There is an intelligent discussion to be had on gender-based actions, on generational and cultural behavioral differences. But the political environment is too hot and it is too reactionary for that now. And it is unfortunate.
So, Jen, what's your verdict?
He just was reminding us that he grew up as the son of a governor and has a lot of entitlement, I think. But also, the idea that the cultural, there was a time when you called maybe a woman sweetie, and now you'd be like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. This isn't that. This is, really sexual things and bullying. I think the other part is that he's a bully. He's not affectionate in it. It's when he keeps referring to it as affection, that's not what it is. It's a bullying thing that he does, and he's known for it across the board. So I think that's also part of why people are saying it's ridiculous that he's tried to justify it.
And if I may quote myself, for those who didn't see the whole thing, again, it was orchestrated in such a way so that his lawyer blamed everybody else before he allegedly took responsibility minutes later. Professor Opie, if I may, I'm guessing somewhere in your coursework, you teach, a lot of books have been written, I've read a lot of them actually, on how to do an apology appropriately, to demonstrate that you meet it. What are some of the elements that have to be embraced for an apology to be real and to be accepted?
Yes, and I'm coming from a restorative justice approach where the whole idea is to restore the person, the victim, the person you've transgressed, to wholeness. The first thing is you have to acknowledge the harm. You have to acknowledge that you have actually done something incorrect. You need to be clear about what that is. You need to be clear about how it has harmed the individual. And you need to turn around. You need to talk about how you will never engage in that behavior again. And here's the final step that I see a lot of politicians and corporate leaders avoid. You still have to make some form of restitution. And here's the hard part. That is determined by the victim, not you. You don't get to say, well, I don't think this rises to the level where I have to quit. They get to say, well, we would like to see you quit. Maybe you lose your job. Maybe you have prison time, because the restorative justice is applied to an array of situations. And then you need to check back in with the victim. And by the way, the victim may not want to engage in restorative justice with you at all, because this requires a reciprocal process. So those are some of the key elements, Jim.
I think he slept in through that class, Tina, as far as I can tell. Jen, do you buy Tina's formula, and would you add anything to it?
Well, no, I think she's right. I think that's, he is such a stark example of the opposite, that it's sort of, but the idea that, I do, in a legal justice sense, of course, in the courts, the victim themselves doesn't determine the punishment. It's the courts who do. And so that's why, but of course, we're talking in this case of, this is someone who's a public servant, right? Who's supposed to be serving all of the citizens of New York, including the people who work for him. And so it really is his job to listen to them and what they feel is appropriate. And he knew, and as you said, he signed a bill that said, this is the law of how people can be treated. So he knew exactly how his citizens wanted him to behave, and he didn't behave like that. And so I think that's,
Tina, back to the sort of the repair, the reparations or restitution part of this. The victims primarily were the 11 women, but they're also the people of New York who he was charged with serving honorably. How do you make restitution other than resigning to those people?
Well, there have been instances, I don't want to bring up certain stories because I know they're controversial, but there have been instances where people who've been serving have left the position, but then have privately and quietly engaged in programs, nonprofit, volunteer, donated money. I think that if you can do those things over several years, that really suggests an actual character change. But if you're doing it behind a podium to let everyone know, that fails the smell test.
I want to ask you one more thing, both of you, starting with you, Jen. Chuck Todd from Meet the Press, before the resignation on our show last week, said if he, and I'm paraphrasing, if he gets this right, he does have a chance at a second act in American political life. By the way, he wasn't advocating for it. He was just saying it's not unheard of for people, wrongdoers, to essentially get a second opportunity. Based on yesterday, Jen, starting with you, is that possible for this guy?
I think if he wasn't in a state like New York, if he was in a state that wasn't always in the national news, he was on the national news all the time. We saw him on CNN bullying his little brother, and so he's such a known quantity. I think that it could be something that would go away in the way that most national people didn't know that Mitt Romney had not shared the elevator with people at the State House. Well, we all know that, that kind of thing, which is sort of a local lure about what the guy's like. This is so national, and he made himself such a national figure so obviously that I think that it makes it. You can never say no one's going to have a second act. Who knows? But it's I think that he'd be smart to lay back for a little while and do what Tina suggested, which is do some stuff in the background quietly.
Tina, for those who say it's impossible, Anthony Weiner, after his first set of offenses, was leading the race for mayor of New York City until more crap came out on him. So it's not impossible, is it?
No, anything can happen, and we just have to look at our national elections to see that anyone can be in the office, regardless of their track record. My hope is that we recognize there are new, fresh political minds who are on the bench, who are waiting for a turn. Let them have a bat at it. Become a mentor. Sponsor somebody new. step out of the way. I mean, I'm getting older. This is not ageist, but listen, you've had your turn at bat. It's time for other people to bring us forward.
I hope you're not talking to me, but despite that, Tina, it is good to see you. Jen, it is great to see you too. I've missed you too. Be well.
Thanks.
Thank you.